Hi guys, welcome back to Casual Watch Review channel. We've got another great launch day interview for us here. We are here to introduce the new version of one of Christopher Ward's iconic watches. And I would love to welcome back to the channel one of the talented designers that has shaped Christopher Ward into one of the leading British watch brands. That is Will Brackfield. Will, welcome back to the channel.
Always fun to be here.
So I thought this was when I saw the press release, I thought this was a newer version of the C60 Tide. But even though it does pass a resemblance to it, this is actually a different model or a newer model.
Yeah, so previously we had the C60 Sapphire and the C60 Tide, both in the Pro 600 ranges. As we brought in the Pro 300, we've ended up stopping Pro 600, so we thought it was time to bring that aesthetic and those features over to the Pro 300. So instead of replacing it with two watches, we have basically combined the two. That's what the C60 Sapphire Edge is going to be.
Well, before we dive into talking about this watch, I don't know if you saw AP's announcements yesterday about the perpetual moon phase calendar that they released. I don't know if you read it as well, but it looks like they're using a photorealistic version of the moon for their moon phase. So did you ever see a time that Christopher Ward would basically be homaged by one of the Holy Trinity?
Oh, I would not be brave enough to claim that. That's nope. Not falling into that trap.
No, as soon as I read that, a little smile to my face, because the last moon phase we talked about was famous for, wasn't it, having a photorealistic version of the moon?
Why wouldn't you? If you could, why wouldn't you?
Unfortunately, Will, due to some logistic challenges, I wasn't able to get this watch before the launch. This footage, very kindly given to me by Watch Chris. I'll leave a link to his channel in the comment section down below. So Chris, big thanks for sending this footage in. But let's learn more about the watch. What I like about this release is to me, all of the cool bits that we saw in the Lumiere, except for the actual lume part of it, but the more refinement of the case, and you've kept that clasp as well, which I think is awesome. So is this using some of the design work that you did for the Lumiere now in the main line?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the main thing about this watch is that, well, apart from the Sapphire dial and the new Sapphire bezel, but the fact that this is the first Pro 300 we're doing with an SW300 non-COSC. People have been asking for it for a long time why are our SW300s always COSC? But so this is kind of the first one that's not. So allowing it to have the SW300 means we can get the even thinner case, just like the Lumiere. So kind of naturally, a lot of the features from the Lumiere carry over purely because of the movement that we've chosen to use in the new Sapphire Edge.
Yeah, I love that. We talked about it. I don't think it was the last one we did, but the one before, where we talked about the Lumiere. The light catcher is one of my favorite cases on a watch, and I've mentioned this in other avenues or as often as possible. But you've really just reducing it ever so slightly really does change the profile of the watch and the way it wears it in quite an interesting way.
When we first started creating the light catcher, it was to make a watch that was fairly thick feel thinner. And then over time, we've created watches that are actually pretty thin while still using that same kind of philosophy. So it's just kind of compounded where it is thin and we've made it look even thinner than it is. So it's compounded over time. And yeah, I agree. The new cases with the SW300s in, they wear so nicely.
Similar to the Tide, although I should probably stop comparing them because they're different watches now. But similar to Tide, this is just one size version at 42 millimeters. There's not a range of sizes like in the 300 series.
No, not yet. I think maybe I've mentioned this with other launches, but if a model does well, that's kind of like one of the obvious routes to take it to expand the collection. It's size and color. So we've got nothing planned at the moment, but if it's a huge success, then you'll be seeing other sizes coming soon.
Well, let's just go over that really quick. So it's a 42 millimeter case, lug to lug of 49.32 millimeters, and then a case height of only 10.7 millimeters. And I'm saying only 10.7 millimeters because this has still got the 300 meters water resistance.
Yes, and that's not the impressive part. Is that the Sapphire dial, because it's sapphire, has a minimum thickness. You can't make it as thin as a regular brass dial. So in general, sapphire dialed watches are thicker. And so we've managed to do the sapphire dial and the 300 meters all in that thickness of case.
You're really kind of holding your own here with the sapphire dials, aren't you? Because aren't they a real pain in the arse to work with?
They used to be. It's all kind of a learning process. So we'd use them on the moon, the original Moon Glow, and then on the C60 Sapphire. And it's just kind of changing your way of working when assembling them, and you've got to be a lot more careful when you're assembling the watch. Once it's all assembled, it's fine. It's just being very careful about how tight you make things, and you can very easily kind of, if you're tightening one of the screws to hold it down, you can break it. But yeah, I think it was just a learning process. It's a little more delicate than brass, but kind of once we got that technique down, it's not too bad.
So one of the new features of this watch as well over the previous Tide was that this now includes sapphire bezel.
Yeah, we just kind of had the conversation. We knew we were going to be bringing the new version of this watch out. We knew we wanted to upgrade a few things. And we just, in hindsight, thought, oh, it's a little bit strange that we're calling this watch the Sapphire, or the C60 Sapphire, and it's not got a sapphire bezel, which is obviously something we'd done previously on the Aquitaine, and we had all the knowledge for it. So we were like, well, if we're going to do a new Sapphire, why don't we go all the way? And also it's got the benefits of being able to loom kind of more finely. So if you were to do it in ceramic, you'd have to engrave all the kind of the smaller areas that you want to loom and then fill them. Whereas on the Sapphire, you can kind of do printing tools and build it up that way.
What I like about this is the way that there is a slight, you have a flat sapphire crystal on it, but it is slightly raised as well, which gives a nice visual.
We did that for the side profile proportions. Like I was saying with the dial, on the bezel, you also have a minimum thickness when it comes to the sapphire, so it's workable. If we were to continue the metal part of the bezel all the way up, all of a sudden the bezel itself would have looked very thick versus the mid case, and it would have thrown everything off. It would have made the watch look very top heavy. So we decided to profile it in that way, so you kind of lose the top of the sapphire visually in terms of height. So it just kind of helps with the thin feeling of the watch.
I think one of the other interesting things about this model is, well, first of all, let's talk about the clasp, because you've kept that excellent clasp from the Lumiere, that push button clasp, which I really loved on the Lumiere, but you've also transitioned this now in, because this watch is stainless steel, whereas the Lumiere was titanium. So you've transferred that to stainless steel now, and you've created the push button clasp of this one as well.
Yeah, it was very popular on the Lumiere, and it just seemed like the obvious choice to kind of continue putting it on upcoming watches.
Yeah, so whereas the Tide version had a strap made of recycled ocean plastic, I think it was. Thought I knew my Christopher Ward watches, but is this the first time you've done a loomed strap on a watch?
I say yes. It's definitely the first time I've done it since I've been here. I'm almost certain it is. So we'd tested it previously, so it was something that came up with the Moonglow. So we had tested it where we did kind of like a hybrid loom with leather construction, and it didn't ever really work on that. But we knew we wanted to do it, and our strap supplier had said they could do it, so we kind of wanted to fit it in somewhere. And then this one kind of felt like it was the right watch to do it on, purely because on the bezel has all these kind of very fine loomed parts on it, and then you've got the two luminescent lines that run down the side of the strap, so it kind of all fits together. And we'd discussed doing a full loom strap, and we kind of felt that was maybe too much in this instance. But yeah, we just thought it was fun, and we knew it was something we could do, so we decided to go for it.
It definitely looks good in the renders. I've never had I know other companies do this where they have the loom strap or loom on the back, but this looks really cool. Yeah, this is a good choice for this watch. I like it. So you mentioned, we're just going back to the movement now, so you're using the SW300 in this one for the thinner profile. Is this going to be a trend, or are you still going to be producing watches that have the SW200 in there? Is this a shift in movement technologies, or will there still be a blend?
Well, yeah, we'll continue to blend the two. I think it just kind of depends on the watch and depends on where we're aiming it in terms of price points. Obviously, the SW300 has its advantages in terms of the power reserve and the thickness, but then the SW200 works great if you've got a price point you want to sit below. Kind of, you've got to weigh it up where you want to place the watch in the range, and hence which movement you want to use. So yeah, we're going to continue to blend the use of both of them. So it's kind of one of those watches where it's a lot of little updates that kind of make it just feel like a more complete watch rather than a complete refresh and a bigger step forward. It's just slowly improving everything, like the thickness, the clasp, the now sapphire bezel. So it's,
Yeah, and this watch has always been a favourite of mine. And one thing I haven't asked you yet was this one, you're still maintaining that relationship with the Blue Marine Foundation.
Every Trident watch has, we donate 2% of the sale price to the Blue Marine Foundation. So we're going to continue doing that with this watch.
Yeah, I always think that's funny with where you compare it against the Seiko, where they always release a Save the Ocean watch, but it's not quite clear which ocean they're saving, whereas you guys have always been completely transparent about the work that the Blue Marine Foundation does, and their website is obviously very comprehensive as well. And I think
so. Actually, the partnership started on what ended up turning into the original C60 Tide. So we made so it was just after the Sapphire came out. We wanted to do a collaboration piece with them. It was the start of our partnership, and we created one of the C60 Sapphires, but it had a ceramic bezel and the kind of turquoise highlights that then made it onto the Tide and now onto this Sapphire Edge. So funny enough, that is kind of part of the story of how we got to this new watch.
The dial itself, you've kept that just Christopher Ward design language. The sword hands and that arrow tip for the hour hand, and the indices have got that polishing and brushing on them that we all appreciate. And I think one of the cool advantages with that Sapphire is that I'm a huge fan of the date, and thankfully you can see all of the dates through it.
Yeah. So it's slightly changed on this one. So something we haven't spoken about yet is we've added a gradient to this one on the dial. So it's very subtle, but it is a change from the last ones. So on the last ones, it was just that solid blue color. And something when we look back at it that we felt could be improved is you could kind of see the movement holder a bit, and some of the areas on the outside of the movement aren't that pretty. We've now put a gradient on the coloring disc, so it kind of fades into, on the outside it's quite opaque, and then it kind of fades into this nice transparent blue in the center. Visually, you kind of don't really notice there's a gradient until you hold it next to the other ones that don't have it. But it was just like a small refinement that we ended up doing on it.
What's cool with these Sapphire dials as well is those screws. I quite like those to show how the dial actually has to attach to it.
Yeah, because it's you can't attach it. Well, you can attach it in a few different ways, but in terms of our case, this is kind of the only way you can attach it. Because if you were to using a brass dial, obviously you'd weld the feet onto the bottom of the dial, and you would never know there was dial feet under there. But obviously you can't really do that. Well, you can't do that at all with Sapphire. So you've kind of got to find other ways of fixing it. So yeah, I think it's on this one we tried to kind of hide it a little more. So on the previous one they were a little more obvious, but with the gradient it actually helps kind of hide them. So you have to more look for them this time, whereas on the last ones, they were kind of very obvious.
Then that brings on to the important topic. A, are these going to be limited edition? And B, what prices are they coming in at?
They're not limited, so open series. And then price on the loom strap, so it starts at £995, and then $1,195. And then on the bracelet, it starts at £1,095 and $1,315.
And I've got to ask this because I'm sure we'll get the comment. Is the strap available as a separate buy?
I'm actually not sure, but I'm not sure.
I'm going to put a vote in for that. I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure lots of people will. I just don't want to promise something that doesn't happen.
If people want to see this in person, there's obviously the Wind Up show happening in Dallas on March the 15th, which I'm sure that you'll have a version there to see. And then Wind Up New York as well. I'm guessing this watch will be there. And then you can also see this watch. If you're in the Dallas area, you can see it at the new Christopher Ward showroom. And also, obviously, the UK showroom as well, if you want to see it in person.
And also British Watchmakers Day. So we'll be there, and we'll be showing, this will be one of the watches on show.
Oh, I forgot that very important British Watchmakers show as well. Yeah. Christopher Ward, obviously a founding member of that.